Hey everyone, welcome back to the channel. Before we dive into today's story, make sure to hit that like button, subscribe, and turn on the notification bell so you never miss our deep dives into aviation mysteries and disasters. And don't forget to share this video with your friends who love aviation history, because today's case is one that shocked not only Argentina, but the entire world. This is the story of LAPA Flight 3142, a routine evening flight that ended in unthinkable tragedy on August 31, 1999. 65 people lost their lives. Dozens were injured, and Argentina's aviation industry would never be the same. What exactly happened that night? And how could a series of small human errors turn into one of the deadliest crashes in South America? Let's break it down. It was the late 1990s. Argentina's skies were busier than ever, with private airlines competing for passengers and promising low fares. One of these carriers was LAPA, Líneas Aéreas Privadas Argentinas. It wasn't the country's biggest airline, but it was popular for its affordable tickets. On the evening of August 31, 1999, Flight 3142 was scheduled to depart from Buenos Aires, Jorge Newbery Airport, better known as Aeroparque, and head north to the city of Córdoba. The aircraft was a Boeing 737-200, an older but widely used model at the time. Registered as LVWRZ, this plane had been flying for nearly 3 decades. It had racked up 64,000 flight hours and over 38,000 takeoffs and landings. In other words, this jet had been through a lot. On board that night were 95 passengers, ordinary people traveling for business, family visits or leisure, and 5 crew members, including 2 pilots with thousands of hours of experience. The captain was Gustavo Weigel, 45 years old, with more than 6,500 hours of flight time. His first officer was Luis Echeverri, just 31 years old with around 4,000 hours. Both men knew the Boeing 737 inside and out. At least, that's what everyone thought. Flight 3142 was originally scheduled to leave around 8:36 p.m., but right before departure, the crew reported a problem with engine number 1. Mechanics rushed over, inspected it, and gave the all-clear. By 8:54 p.m., the aircraft was ready at runway 13. The weather was perfect, clear skies, light winds. For passengers, it seemed like just another smooth, routine flight. But inside the cockpit, things weren't as professional as they should have been. Instead of focusing entirely on the pre-flight checklist, the 2 pilots were chatting about personal issues. Investigators later discovered that both men were distracted by financial and personal problems outside of work. These conversations bled into the cockpit environment, where discipline and focus are supposed to be absolute. Now here's the critical moment. During the pre-flight checklist, one of the most basic and essential tasks is to set the wing flaps. For those unfamiliar, flaps are movable panels on the wings that extend downward to give the aircraft extra lift during takeoff. Without them, a plane like the Boeing 737 simply cannot generate enough lift to leave the ground safely. But that evening, the flaps were never set. As the aircraft lined up on runway 13 and the pilots pushed the throttles forward, a warning alarm blared in the cockpit. This was the takeoff warning system, TWS. A built-in safeguard that alerts the crew if the plane isn't properly configured for takeoff. Instead of stopping the aircraft immediately, the pilots ignored the alarm. Whether they assumed it was a false warning or simply felt pressure to avoid more delays, we may never know for sure. The Boeing 737 roared down the runway, engines thundering, speed increasing. But without the flaps extended, the wings weren't creating enough lift. The aircraft struggled, bouncing slightly, but it simply couldn't get airborne. By the time the pilots realized something was wrong, it was already too late. At the end of the runway, the plane smashed through the airport perimeter barrier, careened across a busy road, striking a passing car, and finally slammed into a gas regulation plant just beyond the airport. The impact was catastrophic. A massive fireball erupted as fuel tanks exploded, engulfing the wreckage in flames. The aftermath was horrifying. Of the 100 people on board, 63 passengers and 2 people on the ground were killed instantly or in the fire that followed. Only 37 survived, and of those, 31 suffered severe injuries. Emergency crews rushed to the scene, but the intensity of the fire left little chance for most of those trapped inside. Witnesses described seeing the night sky lit up by the blaze, and traffic in Buenos Aires came to a halt as news spread across the city. Argentina and the world watched in shock. The investigation into Flight 3142 was led by Argentina's Junta de Investigaciones de Accidentes de Aviación Civil, JAEAC, with support from the U.S. National Transportation Safety Board, NTSB, and the Federal Aviation Administration, FAA. The findings were chilling. The pilots failed to extend the flaps and ignored the warning system. The crew was distracted, unprofessional, and failed to follow procedure. LAPA, the airline, had poor oversight and weak enforcement of pilot training and certification. Investigators even discovered that Captain Weigel's license had actually expired. This wasn't just a case of one mistake. It was a chain of failures, both human and institutional. Flight 3142 exposed not just the failings of 2 pilots, but of the entire Argentine aviation system at the time. Regulators weren't properly monitoring airlines. Airlines were cutting corners, and pilots were under pressure, both personally and professionally. LAPA Airlines faced intense criticism after the crash. Public confidence evaporated, and by 2003, the airline had shut down permanently. In the courtroom, blame was shared between the pilots, the airline's executives, and government regulators. The message was clear. This was not just a pilot error crash, it was a system failure. The tragedy left such a deep scar on Argentina that it inspired a film, Whisky Romeo Zulu, directed by Enrique Piñeiro, a former LAPA pilot. The movie dramatized not only the crash, but also the negligence and corruption behind the airline industry. For many Argentines, it became a symbolic piece of storytelling that captured the anger and grief of the nation. So, what does the LAPA Flight 3142 crash teach us? Checklists save lives. Aviation operates on strict procedures for a reason, and even one missed step can be fatal. Discipline in the cockpit is non-negotiable. Personal problems and casual conversations must stay outside. Inside the cockpit, focus is everything. Regulation matters too. Airlines and governments must enforce rules, training, and licensing. Without accountability, tragedies like this can and will happen again. And finally, the human factor remains the weakest link in aviation safety, no matter how advanced the aircraft may be. Friends, the story of LAPA Flight 3142 is one of the saddest in aviation history, but it's also a reminder. Every time you board a plane today, you can take comfort in knowing that tragedies like this led to stronger rules, better training, and safer skies. If you found this video informative, make sure to like, share, and subscribe. Drop your thoughts in the comments below. Do you think this crash was mainly the pilot's fault or the airline's? We'll be back soon with another deep dive into the mysteries and lessons of aviation. Until then, stay safe, look to the skies, and remember, every detail matters when it comes to flying. Goodbye for now.